The only stimulating thing about it is that exhilarating Pepsi taste.
You need a name. I'll call you Freckles.
Lots of pound puppies need your love.
You can see the complete 3D Cabbage Patch Adventure.
Remember those fads? The loud, goofy ones you forgot you grew up with? In the 1980s, these trends ruled our classrooms, bedrooms, and after-school lives, shaping how we played, dressed, and fit in. But if they mattered so much then, why did we let them fade? Garbage Pail Kids were not just trading cards. They were tiny pieces of chaos, proudly stuffed in our backpacks, hidden from teachers, and swapped like currency on the schoolyard. These gross-out parodies of Cabbage Patch Kids were banned in classrooms, scorned by adults, and totally beloved by anyone under age 13. You could open a pack and get anything from Atom Bomb to Leaky Lindsay, and it felt like treasure every single time. They were disgusting. They were hilarious, and they made us feel like rebels for owning them. The glossy surface, the sour smell of the stickers, even the waxy pink wrapper. It is all burned into memory. The worst part is, we did not just laugh at these cards. We studied them. We memorized their names. We organized them in shoeboxes and traded them like rare baseball cards, except these had puke jokes and radioactive warts. They were a middle finger to the neat and tidy world our parents wanted us to live in. And when a teacher took one away, that was just confirmation we were onto something good. Looking back now, you can still feel the weird joy of peeling one off its card and deciding which unfortunate piece of furniture it would ruin next. We might have been kids with scraped knees and pudding-stained shirts, but Garbage Pail Kids made us feel like collectors of forbidden art, and in some weird way, that felt cool. Hypercolor shirts were magic, at least they were to us. 1 second your shirt was green, then boom, someone slapped your shoulder and it turned purple. Heat-reactive clothing. We had never seen anything like it. These shirts made us feel like walking science experiments, like we were part of some high-tech fashion trend straight out of the future. In reality, we were just middle schoolers with sweaty armpits and a new way to show it. Hypercolor never lasted long, literally. Wash it enough times, and the magic wore off. But in that first week, you were a celebrity. Kids would run up and press handprints into your shirt just to see the colors change. Suddenly, being warm-blooded became a fashion statement. And sure, it turned patchy and faded faster than a cheap dollar store toy, but you did not care. It was the 80s. Loud and gimmicky was the entire vibe. And the more unpredictable it looked, the better. Nobody wore hypercolor because it was practical. We wore it because it was awesome. It was weird, colorful, short-lived, and we loved every minute of it. Even now, the thought of your friend pointing to your back and yelling, "Dude, your shirt's changing," feels like a memory on fast forward. Hypercolor was not built to last, but for that brief moment, we felt like heat-controlled superheroes. Friendship pins were more than crafts. They were social currency. You did not just make them for yourself. You made them for your best friends, your desk neighbor, your playground clique. We are talking about tiny safety pins decorated with plastic beads, usually clipped to the laces of your sneakers like some kind of low-budget merit badge. The more pins you had, the more friends you had. Or at least, that was the idea. Some were simple, 2 colors, a couple beads, done. Others were elaborate little rainbows designed by kids with patience and too much time on their hands. And you wore them with pride. Every single one meant someone liked you enough to give you a piece of their afternoon. It was like a friendship bracelet for your shoes. And if someone gave you one with your favorite colors, that was peak approval. No money involved, no stores, just a box of beads and the desire to say, "You matter to me." Even now, the image of faded Converse with rows of jangling pins makes your chest feel a little warmer. These were the kinds of fads that taught us things: patience, generosity, and maybe a little playground politics. Because yeah, it hurt when someone traded one of yours away without telling you. But that is how you learned what friendship really meant. 1 pin at a time. Wacky wall walkers made absolutely no sense, and yet they were everywhere. You would throw it at the wall and just watch it slowly tumble down. Sometimes it would fall like a rock. Other times, it would stick like a haunted gummy bear crawling toward freedom. They came in cereal boxes or cheap vending machines, usually shaped like octopuses or bugs, and they smelled like rubber balloons and disappointment. But to a kid, that was entertainment gold. You could waste hours in your bedroom seeing how many times it would walk before it hit the floor. It was quiet. It was weird. And it was way more fun than it had any right to be. Sure, they got dirty fast, covered in lint, hair, dust, and crumbs, and once that happened, good luck reviving it. But there was always another one. And that sticky, gravity-defying magic was irresistible. It made walls fun. It made windows a thrill ride. And even when it failed, it was hilarious. You did not care about the science behind it. All you knew was that it moved, and that was enough. Sometimes it would stick to your forehead or your sibling's face, and suddenly you had a 10-minute laugh riot. In a world before smartphones, we made do, and we did it with a gooey, slow-motion toy that had absolutely no purpose, except to make us laugh. E.T. fingers and toys were peak movie merch. After E.T. the Extraterrestrial dropped in 1982, everything changed. Suddenly, you could not walk into a toy aisle without seeing that wrinkled little alien's face. And the crown jewel? The glow-up finger. A giant plastic light-up E.T. finger you could wear like a weird alien ring. Press a button, and it glowed red. That was it. That was the whole toy. But somehow, that was enough to make it feel magical. Because if you had that finger, it meant you had seen the movie. You got it. You were part of the experience. And for kids, that movie was a big deal. It was about friendship, loyalty, and maybe being a little weird in a world that did not understand you. So yeah, wearing a glowing E.T. finger felt like more than just plastic and batteries. It was a badge of honor. Combine that with plush E.T. dolls, lunchboxes, and pajamas, and suddenly your whole childhood had a theme. You were Elliot, and E.T. was your ride or die. And that weird red finger, that was the power. The power to heal, to phone home, or at the very least, to poke your sibling in the arm and pretend it was a miracle. Slap bracelets were violent fun in disguise. You took this soft-looking strip of colorful fabric, whacked it on your wrist, and snap. It curled perfectly into place. The sound it made? Addictive. The feeling? Even better. These bracelets were part toy, part fashion statement, and 100% classroom contraband. Teachers hated them. Kids loved them. It was the ultimate, I should not have this, but I do, accessory. Designs ranged from neon lightning bolts to leopard print to holographic stars. The louder, the better. And yeah, some of them cracked or got bent and sharp on the edges, which is why schools eventually banned them. But that only made them more desirable. Slap bracelets were fast. They were fun. And most importantly, they were communal. You would bring a bunch to school and just slap them onto your friends. It hurt a little, but it was part of the charm. There was this unspoken rule. You did not flinch. You took the slap. You wore the bracelet. And for the rest of the day, it was yours. There was something electric about that. A jolt of energy wrapped in sparkly fabric and bad decision-making. We were kids. Of course, we wanted jewelry that hit back. Trapper keepers were not just binders. They were identity. You walked into class with a fresh Trapper keeper and people noticed. It snapped shut with that loud Velcro krrkakae, and inside, organized chaos. Color-coded folders, doodles, secret notes, maybe a gum wrapper or two. These things were loud. Neon stripes, racing cars, rainbow unicorns. Whatever screamed you. You picked your Trapper keeper like someone picks a car. It had to represent you. And once you had it, it became a permanent fixture of your desk, your locker, your life. Homework lived there, love notes lived there, detention slips lived there. Everything that mattered had a home. It was weirdly comforting, knowing exactly where your stuff was. Plus, those built-in folders made it feel like your own little office. You felt mature, responsible, cool. And then one day, it fell off your desk, exploded open, and shot papers across the room. Welcome to the real world. Still, we love them. We still do. Because for a kid in the 80s, having a trapper-keeper meant you had your life together. Or at least, it looked that way. Scratch and sniff stickers were the currency of the sticker book empire. These little squares were everything. You got them from teachers, from dentists, from the quarter machine at the grocery store, and each one had a scent, not just a hint of a scent, a full-force, in-your-nose blast of whatever it claimed to be. Bubblegum, root beer, pickles, pizza. Some were amazing, others were traumatic. But the thrill was always there. You scratched, you sniffed, you passed it to your friend, you debated whether stinky cheese actually smelled like cheese. And maybe it did, maybe it did not. But that was not the point. These stickers made your school supplies smell like a weird bakery, and your sticker album into a sensory museum. Everyone had their favorites, everyone had their doubles, and the more obscure the scent, the cooler you felt. You were not just collecting, they were badges of experience. You could still remember which ones made you gag and which ones made you hungry. It was messy, colorful fun in the middle of a school day that otherwise smelled like pencil shavings and old lunchboxes. Pop Rocks were basically edible fireworks. You poured the candy into your mouth and it snapped, cracked, and exploded on your tongue like it had something to prove. The sound was sharp, the feeling was wild, and the rumors, even better. Everyone swore they knew a kid who mixed Pop Rocks with soda and exploded. Of course it was nonsense, but the drama sold it. Suddenly, eating candy became a science experiment. You dared your friends. You did it yourself. And when it fizzed so hard your jaw vibrated, you laughed like it was the greatest thing in the world. Pop Rocks did not last long, but when they were hot, they were hot. You could get them in cherry, grape, watermelon, does not matter. The experience was the flavor, and in the 80s, everything needed a gimmick. Cereal had toys, shoes had pumps, candy had explosions. The California Raisins were the strangest pop stars to ever hit a lunchbox. They were claymation raisins, with sunglasses, singing Motown. That is not a joke. They had music videos, merchandise, a cartoon show, and action figures, all based on dried fruit. It started as a commercial, just a fun ad for raisins. But then people fell in love, like deeply in love. There were plush toys, posters, Halloween costumes. It became a cultural moment. You could not walk through a toy aisle without seeing at least one grinning raisin with a saxophone, and we ate it up. Because it was weird, catchy, and full of personality. Even if no one was quite sure why it existed, it did not matter. It made you dance, it made you laugh, and it made raisins kind of cool? Looking back, it makes zero sense. But when you were a kid, seeing a raisin do the moonwalk was just another part of your Saturday morning. Pound puppies were not just toys, they were emotional support animals with floppy ears. Soft, sad-eyed plush dogs tucked in little cardboard adoption boxes, complete with their own birth certificates. You did not just buy a pound puppy, you rescued it. You gave it a name. You promised to love it forever. And somehow, it really felt like that mattered. These were not loud or flashy toys. They did not light up or make noise, but the minute you held one, you got it. They were quiet, cuddly, loyal, and just a little bit lonely, like you sometimes felt, even if you did not know how to say it yet. Pound puppies were different from action figures or dolls. They did not need a story or a world, they just needed you. And for some reason, that felt important. Whether you got yours from a birthday party or the clearance bin at the toy store, it instantly became yours. You hugged it during thunderstorms. You tucked it under your arm during long car rides. You made a tiny bed for it with your old socks. And if your friends had one too, well then it was a whole pound puppy family. That box it came in? You kept it because it made it feel real, like you were actually giving something a home. Big hair in the 80s was not just a style, it was a declaration made with Aquanet and dreams. You could smell it coming from down the hallway, that unmistakable chemical tang of a girl with a plan and a full can of hairspray. The higher the hair, the closer to stardom. That was the motto. Whether you were in high school or just pretending to be grown up in front of the mirror, getting your bangs to stand like a frozen wave was an art form. You teased. You sprayed. You teased again. You sprayed again. And then, don't touch it. That thing could survive a tornado. For a while, it felt like every school photo, music video, and sitcom was sponsored by gravity-defying hair. Aquanet was the weapon of choice. Cheap, powerful, always available in a tall purple can. And sure, it probably took a few years off the ozone layer, but it gave you wings. Literal ones if you were going for the feathered look. Boys had their own version too, flat on the sides, huge on top, like a frosted mushroom. We are not proud, but we are not ashamed either, because that hair was confidence. It was effort. It was your own DIY crown, sculpted in your bathroom with a comb and a battle cry. Mad balls were gross, and that was the whole point. These were squishy rubber balls with faces only a monster could love. One had bloodshot eyes, another had fangs. Some were stitched up like Frankenstein. They were creepy, nasty, and absolutely glorious. Kids loved them. Adults were confused, and that made them even better. You could toss them, collect them, throw them at your little brother when he least expected it. They were part toy, part horror movie, and all attitude. No two were alike. Each one had a name like Slobulus or Oculus Orbis that sounded like it belonged in a haunted science lab. And even though they were technically just foam balls, they had personality. The kind of toy that felt alive in your backpack. You could squeeze them and hear that little puff of air escape, like they were breathing. They fit perfectly in your hand, and even better in your imagination. You might not remember all their names now, but you remember the feeling of picking one up and thinking, "This is disgusting." I love it. It was a golden age for gross-out humor, and Mad Balls were its squishy little kings. Metal lunchboxes with thermoses were the 80s version of a fashion statement. Your lunchbox was your identity. You did not just carry your sandwich and apple in it, you carried your soul. Whether it had He-Man, Rainbow Bright, Transformers, or strawberry shortcake, it told the world exactly who you were the moment you stepped into the cafeteria. You slammed it on the table like it was a badge of honor. Inside, there was a little plastic thermos with a tiny cup lid, usually filled with lukewarm soup or chocolate milk that had been warm for too long. The box itself? Tough as nails. Drop it, dent it, scratch it, it still worked. In fact, the more beat up it was, the cooler it looked. A couple of rust spots just meant you had seen some things. The clink of that metal latch opening was one of the most satisfying sounds of childhood. It meant food. It meant freedom. It meant 20 minutes of sitting with your friends and trading half your peanut butter sandwich for a ding-dong. And if someone else had the same lunchbox as you, instant best friend. That lunchbox was your sidekick. It sat by you every day, in every class, waiting for its moment to shine. And when you outgrew it, you still kept it. Because it was never just a box. It was a time capsule. MUSCLE figures were tiny, weird, and completely irresistible. Pink plastic wrestlers, about 2 inches tall, with more muscles than a comic book cover and names nobody could pronounce. They came in tubs, on cards, and sometimes mysteriously showed up in the couch cushions like lost treasure. You never got just one. You got a handful, maybe a dozen. Some had 4 arms. Some looked like aliens. Some were shaped like food. It did not matter. They were weird, they were awesome, and they were yours. You carried them in your pocket and whipped them out at recess like it was a showdown. They did not bend. They did not talk. They did not need to. Your imagination did all the work. One kid would bring his whole collection to school in a pencil box, and suddenly everyone was sitting in a circle, making battle noises and arguing over who won. No rules, no instructions, just action. They smelled like warm rubber and childhood freedom. They were always slightly sticky for some reason, but nobody questioned it. MUSCLE figures were the perfect toy. Cheap, portable, and infinite in possibilities. Reebok pump shoes made you feel like a superhero with a secret weapon. Regular sneakers? Please. These had buttons. You pressed the little basketball-shaped pump on the tongue and poof, air inflated around your foot. Or at least, that is what the commercials promised. In your mind, the second you pumped them, you could run faster, jump higher, and dunk like the pros. In reality, you probably just ran the same, but with more confidence. And that made all the difference. They were expensive. They were flashy. And if you had a pair, you were basically royalty in gym class. Kids would crowd around, begging for a chance to touch the pump. Teachers would roll their eyes. Parents would sigh at the price tag. But none of that mattered. Because in those shoes, you felt like you could dunk from the free throw line, even if you barely made it over the rope ladder. Reebok pumps were not just about performance. They were about feeling powerful, cool, and a little futuristic. They were shoes that made you believe. My pet monster was not just another stuffed animal, it was rebellion in plush form. Blue fur, orange horns, fangs, and best of all, breakaway plastic handcuffs. You heard that right? This toy came chained up like a cartoon prisoner, and you, yes, you, got to set it free. And once you did, it was your monster. Loyal, fuzzy, slightly terrifying, but still huggable. My pet monster blurred the line between scary and adorable in the best way possible. Boys finally got their own version of a cuddle toy, and it growled. If you were lucky, you got the talking version. If not, you still had hours of fun making up voices for it. This was not a doll. This was your bodyguard, your best friend, your bedtime defender against closet ghouls and under-the-bed horrors. You took it to sleepovers. You took it to grandma's. You took it to school until someone said, "Hey, that's not allowed." And then you snuck it in anyway, because rules did not apply to you and your monster. Designer shoelaces were the small accessory that made a huge difference. Neon colors, checkerboard patterns, glow in the dark. If your sneakers had boring white laces, forget it. You needed something loud, something you. Kids in the 80s were obsessed with customizing their shoes, and it started right at the ground level. These laces were cheap, easy to swap, and turned regular kicks into style statements. Some kids even learned special ways to lace them up, crisscross, ladder, spiral. Because in the 80s, even tying your shoes could be a fashion flex. You would go to school and look down at your feet, and everyone else's, like it was a runway show for ankles. If you had laces with flames or lightning bolts, you were untouchable. These were not name-brand accessories. They were personality in string form. You could match them with your scrunchie or your backpack. You could trade them. You could double them up. And when one pair wore out, time to try a new look. That is the thing about fads like these. They gave you control over your look, over your vibe, over one small thing that made you feel just a little more like you. The Rubik's Snake was like the cooler, weirder cousin of the Rubik's Cube. It did not have colors to match or sides to solve. It just twisted and twisted and twisted into endless shapes, into a dog, a swan, a weird zigzag crown you wore for 5 seconds before it snapped apart. You never solved it. That was not the point. The point was to fidget, to fold, to challenge yourself to make something new every time. It was the original fidget toy, before anyone called them that. The Rubik's Snake had no instructions, no batteries, and no limits. It made this satisfying click every time you turned it, like cracking your knuckles, but way more fun. And even when it got stuck or twisted weird, you just twisted it back. No pressure, no competition. Just creativity in your hands. And the best part? You could bring it anywhere. School, road trips, grandma's house. It fit in your backpack and kept your fingers busy when the world got boring. The pogo ball was a chaotic invention that somehow passed as exercise. A rubber ball with a plastic platform wedged around its middle, like Saturn's ring, but for your feet. You stood on it. You jumped. You tried not to wipe out in the driveway. It was part toy, part workout, part lawsuit waiting to happen. But we loved it, because for a few precious minutes you felt like a pogo stick pro. Never mind that there were no handles, or balance, or safety. Just you, your sneakers, and sheer willpower. It looked easy on the commercials. It was not. Your first bounce usually ended in a glorious crash. But once you got the hang of it, the pogo ball was pure joy. Bouncing in the backyard, in the basement, down the sidewalk, laughing so hard you forgot how sore your knees were. It was noisy, it was wobbly, and it was impossible to master, which somehow made it cooler. Nobody really nailed it, but we all tried, again and again. The Viewmaster was not just a toy, it was a portal. You popped in a round cardboard reel, held it up to your eyes, clicked the lever, and boom, you were somewhere else. A dinosaur museum, a Smurfs episode, the Grand Canyon, all in gloriously fuzzy 3D. And the best part? You were the only one who could see it. It was just you and that little window to a tiny, magical world. The reels came in bright red packets you could buy at drugstores or in spinning kiosks at tourist shops. Some kids collected them, others just had a random few passed down from older siblings. You would sit on the carpet, knees to your chest, and flip through scenes like you were watching a private movie no one else could interrupt. It clicked with every frame, literally. That satisfying little snap every time you pulled the lever felt like turning the page of your favorite book. Sometimes the pictures were vibrant. Other times, not so much. But even then, you imagined what the blurry shapes could be. That was the magic. It asked you to fill in the blanks. And when you ran out of reels, you flipped them over, hoping to rediscover a forgotten scene. You never really knew when it was time to stop. The Viewmaster was our version of VR before VR was even a dream. No charging cables, no software, just 2 lenses, a plastic lever, and your imagination running wild. Banana clips were the queen bees of hair accessories. Shaped like giant claws or oversized combs, these plastic clips could tame the wildest hair into something vaguely elegant, or at least vertical. You snapped it open, stretched it wide, gathered your hair like you were building a sculpture, and locked it shut like a hair vault. Suddenly your ponytail was not just a ponytail. It was a waterfall, a mane, a statement. And every girl who owned one had that signature swoop down to an art. The best ones came in jewel tones or fake tortoiseshell. You matched them to your outfit. You begged your mom for the fancy ones with glitter. And once you had a favorite, you guarded it like treasure. Banana clips broke all the time, cheap plastic and too much tension. But we kept buying them because nothing else made your hair feel that dramatic, that adult. They were weirdly elegant, like something a soap opera character would wear at breakfast. You felt powerful, important, like you were heading into a boardroom instead of math class. Even if the clip slipped halfway through the day and your hair fell like a slow-motion avalanche, you still felt proud. Because for a few shining hours, you looked like the cover of a magazine, or at least you felt like it. Banana clips were not just tools. They were transformations. And they made every messy head of hair feel like a masterpiece. Jelly shoes were squeaky, sweaty, and absolutely essential. They were made of soft plastic that looked like it had been dipped in sugar, see-through, sparkly, and available in every neon shade under the sun. They smelled like pool toys and felt like a dream until your feet started to sweat. Then, Slosh City, but nobody cared. You wore them to school, to the mall, to the beach. Sometimes even with socks, which sounds like fashion blasphemy today, but in the 80s, it was a whole look. Jelly shoes made you feel light and magical, like a modern-day Cinderella on a budget. They were cheap, usually under $5, and that made it okay when they broke. Because they always broke. The straps snapped, the soles wore out. Sometimes they melted in the backseat of a hot car. But they were so pretty, so shiny. And no matter how impractical they were, you always begged for a new pair. Even now, the memory of walking across a hot sidewalk, the jelly shoes sticking to your feet with every step, still makes you wince and smile at the same time. You would take them off at the end of the day, and there would be these little plastic lines pressed into your skin like temporary tattoos. And you felt proud, like those marks proved something. Jelly shoes were not just about comfort. They were about sparkle, about summer, about growing up just enough to care about shoes, even if they left you with blisters. Pepsi Free was not Pepsi without caffeine. It was Pepsi without fun. The can was red, not blue, not silver, red. And somehow that made it feel like a soda from another dimension. You saw it on the shelves and thought, wait, what's that? Then you tried it and immediately understood why it never lasted. But in the 80s, it had a moment. It was everywhere. Vending machines, commercials, even Back to the Future. That line, "Give me a Pepsi free," was not just a joke. It was a snapshot of a time when soft drinks were having a full-on identity crisis. Companies were trying everything. No caffeine, no sugar, no taste. But you drank it anyway, because it felt like the grown-up thing to do. Maybe your parents switched to it during their health kick, or maybe it was the only cold can left in the fridge. Whatever the reason, you popped the tab, took a sip, and instantly missed the real stuff. It tasted like soda that wanted to be something else. But that odd flavor, that weird red can, it sticks in your brain like a faded photograph. Pepsi Free was one of those things you forgot existed, until someone mentions it. Then boom, you are back in a kitchen with yellow tile floors and a fridge covered in magnets, holding a can that never quite lived up to its name. "Where's the beef?" was not just a catchphrase, it was a national obsession. It started in a Wendy's commercial. 3 elderly women crowd around a hamburger bun, lifting the top to reveal a tiny, sad patty. And then Clara Peller delivers the line, loud, sharp, perfect. "Where's the beef?" The whole country lost it. Within weeks, it was on t-shirts, bumper stickers, mugs, and even campaign buttons. Kids said it, adults said it. It showed up in classrooms, comedy sketches, and even presidential debates. No one cared about the actual hamburger anymore. The phrase had a life of its own. And for kids, saying it was like having a secret weapon. You could shout it during lunch when your sandwich looked skimpy. You could whisper it in class and crack your friends up. It became a way to call out anything that felt disappointing. "Where's the beef?" meant, "Come on, give me the good stuff." It was funny, fast, and oddly empowering. 1 sentence, 3 words, instant icon. And the woman who said it? Clara became a star overnight. She even got her own action figure. But like all fads, it eventually faded. The shirts got tossed, the jokes got old. But the phrase? It stuck around. And even now, decades later, it still pops into your head at the exact right moment. That is the power of a truly great fad. It never really disappears. It just waits for someone to say it again. The flea market at the county fairgrounds was not just an event. It was an ecosystem. Hot pavement under your feet, the smell of popcorn mixing with motor oil, and a wall of voices haggling like they were at a medieval bazaar. Dad had a game plan. He always did. First, a lap to scout, then back around to make the real choices. You wandered behind him wide-eyed, marveling at tables full of license plates, rusted tools, vintage comic books, and a surprising amount of questionable homemade jerky. One guy sold nothing but bumper stickers with sayings that would get you sent to the principal's office. Another had rows of toy yo-yos. And even though Dad warned you, you begged for one anyway. It broke in 5 minutes, maybe 6, but you still carried it around like it was gold. There was always a booth with used records blaring classic rock through dusty speakers, and Dad would flip through the crates like he was searching for buried treasure. Every once in a while, he would hold one up and say, "Now this is music." You did not argue. Not when he looked that happy. And if you thought flea markets were a lawless land of loose change and sunburns, just wait until you hear about the go-kart track that somehow never got shut down. Waterbeds promised the future and delivered waves of regret. On paper, they were perfect, a heated mattress that cradled your body like a floating dream. But in practice, not so much. Every turn sent ripples across the surface. You tried to roll over, and the whole bed sloshed like a bathtub during an earthquake. Getting in without making a tidal wave was a skill. Getting out without sliding to the floor was an Olympic event. They were heavy, hard to move, and leaked at the worst times, usually at 3 in the morning, soaking everything from socks to shag carpet. Still, they were trendy. If someone had a waterbed, it meant they were either incredibly cool or easily convinced by an in-store demo. Some people swore by them. Others swore at them. Pets hated them. Kids loved jumping on them until they learned that waterbeds and sharp objects do not mix. But for a brief, glorious window in the 1980s, having a waterbed meant you had arrived. It was furniture and flex all in one. Looking back, they were impractical, ridiculous, and unforgettable. And somewhere, in a dusty corner of a basement, one is still gently sloshing, waiting for its comeback. Bugles arrived in 1966, and with them came a whole new shape of snacking. Shaped like tiny trumpets or cones, they were the snack you could eat or wear. Kids popped them onto their fingertips, wiggled their hands like claws, and then crunched them down one by one. But the novelty was not just in the shape. Bugles had a distinct texture, light, crispy, and a little flaky, that made them feel different from chips or pretzels. The corn-based flavor was salty, a little buttery, and oddly addictive. Unlike many snacks of the era, Bugles were not trying to copy something else. They were their own thing. Whether poured into a bowl for a party or packed into a lunchbox for recess, they brought a certain crunchy cheer to any setting. Parents liked that they were baked, not fried. Kids just liked that they were fun. Bugles became a staple of 1960s snack shelves, alongside pretzel rods and Fritos, but they stood out for their playfulness. Even now, decades later, slipping a Bugle onto your finger sparks a flash of childhood. They were silly, satisfying, and one of the few snacks that doubled as a costume. The oddball roadside museum was where logic went to take a nap. You saw the hand-painted sign from the highway, "Come see the world's largest pencil," or "America's first toaster still works." Dad would swerve into the gravel lot like it was destiny. Admission was cheap, $3 cash only, and worth every penny. The inside was a fever dream. Display cases filled with bottle caps from all 50 states. A whole wall dedicated to vintage shampoo bottles. A two-headed taxidermy calf that haunted your dreams for a week. "You brought the kid today, huh?" he would say, as if Dad came here weekly. You followed them through rooms of strange collections while Dad laughed and read every single placard out loud. It was like watching a kid in a candy store, only the candy was lawn darts, Pez dispensers, and World War II ration kits. "Now this," Dad would say, holding up a glass jar with something floating in it. "This is history." And even though you rolled your eyes, part of you agreed. But if you really want to feel history in motion, just wait until you join him by the old train tracks, watching boxcars roll by, counting like your life depended on it. Acid wash jeans were loud before you even opened your mouth. With their blotchy patterns and faded splotches, they looked like someone had taken a bleach bottle to denim, and somehow, that became cool. These jeans were rebellious, messy, and unmistakably 1980s. Everyone had a pair. Some wore them tight-rolled at the ankle, others let them drape over high-top sneakers. Acid wash showed up in jackets, skirts, and full matching sets that turned entire outfits into walking eye strain. You could not blend in wearing acid wash. You stood out, and that was the point. It was denim with attitude. Rough, bold, a little chaotic. Parents hated it. Teachers rolled their eyes. But teens embraced the weirdness. It felt edgy, like you were wearing the uniform of a generation that refused to dress quietly. Old photographs now show groups of kids lined up in front of lockers, each one looking like they had just emerged from a bleach accident and loving it. Acid wash was not timeless, it was not flattering, but it was unforgettable. And in a decade known for excess, it fit right in. Even now, pulling on an old pair brings back the noise, the neon, and the thrill of breaking the fashion rules. Tangy Taffy was the candy you had to work for, and that was half the fun. Long before it became part of the Laffy Taffy brand, this chewy strip came in a thin plastic wrapper and offered a sweet, stretchy challenge for any sugar-loving kid in the 1960s. It came in vibrant colors and punchy flavors like grape, strawberry, and sour apple, each one delivering a jolt of sugar and just the right amount of tartness. You could bend it, stretch it, or roll it into a ball before finally taking a bite. The longer you chewed, the stronger the flavor got, which made it perfect for kids trying to make a nickel's worth of candy last the whole afternoon. Sometimes it stuck to your teeth. Sometimes it stuck to the wrapper. But it was always worth it. tangy taffy was less about elegance and more about fun, bright, bold, and unapologetically sweet. For many kids, it was the ultimate playground treat, swapped on school buses or bought from corner stores with pocket change. Today's candies may be smoother or flashier, but they cannot match the simple satisfaction of a taffy you could stretch, fold, and chew until your jaw hurt. The all-you-can-fit junkyard was not a store. It was a scavenger hunt with tetanus on the side. Dad would wear his work pants, which meant they had oil stains older than you were, and he would grab a wrench like he was Indiana Jones about to head into the temple. The guy at the front desk waved him through like an old friend. "Take whatever you can carry," he said, and Dad took that as a challenge. Rows and rows of sun-bleached cars with their guts spilled out, broken washing machines, and lawn mowers that had definitely seen war. Dad would pop a hood, grunt like he found treasure, and climb inside the thing like he was becoming one with it. Meanwhile, you were busy poking through the wreckage and came across something unforgettable, an actual raccoon skull. No idea how it got there. You just knew it was going in your backpack. At some point, Dad would emerge, sweaty and victorious, holding a car mirror or some hose that just needed a clean. It was less about the parts and more about the hunt. And when the sun started setting and he said, "We've got time for one more stop," you hoped it would be the fishing hole, the one no one else knew about. Trapper Keepers were not just school supplies, they were status symbols. With their Velcro flaps and glossy, over-the-top covers, they turned every classroom into a silent competition of who had the coolest binder. Some featured racing cars. Others showed rainbows, unicorns, or abstract laser patterns straight out of a sci-fi fever dream. Inside, everything was neatly organized. Folders, dividers, loose-leaf paper, and secret notes passed during math class. The Velcro made a loud rip every time you opened it, an announcement that learning was about to begin, or at least be attempted. Trapper Keepers made you feel like you had your life together, even if your grades said otherwise. Teachers had a love-hate relationship with them. They were bulky, distracting, but undeniably effective at keeping your stuff in one place. And if you had one with a matching pencil case, you were royalty. Years later, people still remember the smell of the plastic, the feel of flipping through those laminated folders, and the thrill of sliding in a new pack of notebook paper. Trapper Keepers were not just for school, they were for showing off, staying organized, and feeling like you had a little piece of the future in your backpack. Barrel of Monkeys was proof that the simplest ideas can last the longest. Released in 1965, the game came in a bright plastic barrel filled with plastic monkeys that linked together by their arms. That was it. No batteries, no board, no setup time. Just spill the monkeys and try to link as many as you could without dropping the chain. It was harder than it looked. The curved arms never seemed to hook just right, and one wrong move could send your whole line tumbling. But when you did it, when you made it past 10 or 15 monkeys, it felt like a small miracle. Kids would challenge each other to beat their records, dump and restart over and over, totally absorbed. The monkeys themselves were colorful, cheerful, and perfectly palm-sized. The game traveled well. It lived in car glove boxes, grandma's house drawers, and birthday party goodie bags. Decades later, the design remains almost unchanged, which says something about how right they got it the first time. Before screens took over fidget time, there was just you, a barrel, and 24 tiny monkeys daring you to beat your best. The used bookstore with the ham radios in the back was the kind of place where time folded in on itself. You walked in and the smell hit you first. Paper, dust, and something that might have been pipe smoke from 50 years ago. Dad would head for the nonfiction section like it was a treasure map, and you would start flipping through comics that had long-forgotten characters in them. Every wall was covered in books, stacked too deep, sometimes sideways, sometimes just crammed in with no regard for order. But the real secret was in the back room. That was where the ham radios lived. Static buzzed from old speakers, and every now and then a voice would crackle through saying something like, "Calling from Connecticut. Do you copy?" Dad would nod slowly, say, "Nice rig," and start talking shop with the owner like they were part of some invisible club. You never understood a word of it, but it felt cool anyway, like your dad knew something no one else did. He would pick up a radio, fiddle with a dial, and say, "This one's got personality." The man behind the counter always nodded like that meant something. But if you thought that place had character, wait until you see Dad at the county auction barn, outbidding strangers for a box of who knows what. Slap bracelets were the toy that hit your wrist and hit peak popularity almost overnight. They were simple, a metal strip wrapped in colorful fabric that snapped around your arm with one satisfying motion. One moment it was straight, the next it curled tight, clinging to your wrist like a coiled snake. Every kid had one. Some had dozens, trading them like currency during recess. They came in neon colors, animal prints, sparkles, and cartoon characters. The louder the snap, the better. Some kids got so good they could slap them onto their arms without looking. But with popularity came problems. Schools started banning them. Parents worried about the metal underneath. Rumors flew about kids cutting themselves open with a rogue bracelet that had been peeled apart. That only made them cooler. Everyone wanted the forbidden accessory. Teachers tried to confiscate them, but they always found their way back into backpacks and onto arms. Slap bracelets were fun, fast, and a little dangerous, just enough to feel rebellious. They were not just toys. They were fashion statements, fidget tools, and tiny thrills rolled into one. And even now, the sound of that sharp snap is enough to take you right back to 4th grade. Operation was not just a game, it was a test of nerves. Released by Milton Bradley in 1965, this battery-operated board game turned you into a surgeon, operating on a cartoonish patient named Cavity Sam. He lay there in his hospital gown, wide-eyed and helpless, with little cavities holding ailments like a funny bone, a wishbone, or a Charlie horse. The goal? Use tweezers to remove each piece without touching the metal edges of the cavity. If you slipped even slightly, the board buzzed loudly and Sam's red nose lit up. That buzz? It haunted dreams. Kids would wince, laugh, and shout all at once. The challenge was as much about steady hands as it was about keeping calm under pressure. Operation was competitive, silly, and oddly tense. You might remember tilting the board to cheat or holding your breath during a particularly tricky extraction. It was often pulled out during family game night, and even adults found themselves sweating over the tiny butterfly in the stomach. Operation was more than a toy. It was an experience, a rite of passage, and the first time many kids learned that success sometimes comes down to keeping a steady hand. There was no intention to buy anything, and everyone knew it. The furniture store with the free popcorn machine was Dad's idea of a Saturday outing. You would walk in and get hit with that smell, leather, fresh carpet, and hot butter. Dad would head straight for the recliners, and you? Straight to the red and silver popcorn machine near the back. It was always humming, full of those little white bags that were supposed to be single serve, but somehow you found a way to go back 5 times without getting caught. Meanwhile, Dad was doing his test sit. That meant stretching, sighing, and rocking the recliner back and forth like he was making a real decision. "Too stiff," he would say. "This one's a back killer." The sales guy always came over and Dad would nod along, arms crossed, like he was closing in on the deal of the century. But you knew he was not buying a couch, he just liked the idea of picking one. And that popcorn? It was better than movie theater popcorn because it was earned. All this to say, shopping never felt like shopping with Dad. It felt like a game. But speaking of buttons, lights, and games, let me tell you about the kind of place where Dad's inner nerd really came to life. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad, or something pretending to be. Grape, banana, pizza, popcorn. If it existed, there was probably a sticker that gave off a chemical approximation of it. These tiny scented rewards were currency on the playground. You earned them from teachers, you traded them with friends. You collected them in sticker books and flipped through your favorites like a sommelier of glue and artificial scent. Some smelled better than others. Some were so strong they made your eyes water. Others lost their smell after a few scratches but were kept anyway, honored like faded trophies. You knew the popular ones: root beer, bubble gum, and anything with glitter. You also knew the duds, like liverwurst or mystery meat, that somehow ended up in your binder anyway. Scratching a sticker in class was a quiet act of rebellion. You were not supposed to, but you did. And then you passed the notebook around so others could sniff and nod in approval, or gag in horror. Scratch and sniff stickers were low-tech fun with high nostalgic value. They turned paper into treasure. And even today, one whiff of fake strawberry is enough to transport you straight back to third grade with a smile. Twister was the game that got people off the couch and tangled in each other's limbs. Released in 1966, it came with a plastic mat covered in colored circles and a spinner that decided your next move. Left hand red, right foot green. Before you knew it, you were stretching across the mat in a precarious pose, face pressed against someone's knee, hoping no one slipped. It was silly, physical, and weirdly intimate. Some parents called it indecent. Some schools banned it. But kids loved it. So did teenagers. It broke the ice at parties, sparked laughter between siblings, and gave families something active to do together. It was as much about falling over as it was about winning. The rustle of the mat, the sound of giggles as someone toppled, the concentration in trying to stay upright, it was all part of the fun. Twister took no prep and delivered instant chaos. It did not care about strategy. It cared about balance, luck, and how far you could stretch without collapsing. And for many, it was the first time a game made you move, laugh, and fall down all in one messy, unforgettable moment. The community swap meet in the church parking lot was a patchwork quilt of folding tables, lawn chairs, and a whole lot of neighborhood hustle. It was always held early, way too early, and Dad would pull up with a thermos of coffee and a plan. This was not a place for big spenders. This was a battlefield of bartering. He would go straight to the tables stacked with transistor radios, old tools, and that mysterious plastic bin full of tangled cords that might be useful someday. You were eyeing the table with the mismatched action figures and board games missing all the pieces. There was always one guy who sold nothing but velvet Elvis paintings. No one ever saw him set up or pack up. He was just there. The swap meet had its regulars. The Tupperware lady with 1,000 lids and no matching containers, the comic guy who only sold back issues from 1974, and the woman with jars of jelly that looked more suspicious than sweet. But Dad? He moved through it all like a seasoned pro, chatting with everyone like they were old buddies, walking away with something bizarre like a minifan or a set of ceramic pigs, and when he said, "Let's stop by the junkyard real quick," you knew things were about to get even stranger. Mixtapes were handwritten love letters wrapped in cassette cases. You waited by the radio for hours just to hit record at the perfect moment, trying to catch the start of your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. You rewound, replayed, and carefully curated the perfect order so each track melted into the next. Some were made for crushes, others for best friends. Some were sorry tapes, and some were just because. Each one had a theme, a purpose, and a heart behind it. You picked songs that said what you could not. Then you labeled the tape in your best handwriting, maybe decorated the case, and handed it over like it was treasure. Because it was. A great mixtape took hours, sometimes days, to get just right. And when someone gave you one, you listened to it until the tape wore thin and the sound warped. Mixtapes were not just music. They were memories, feelings, time capsules wrapped in magnetic ribbon. And long after the songs faded, you remembered the person who made it, their handwriting, their choices, their message. Even now, in a world of playlists, nothing hits quite like the soft click of a tape deck and a song you once recorded just for someone else. Leet Breed turned a dark room into a glowing gallery. Introduced by Hasbro in 1967, this toy was unlike anything else at the time. It featured a black screen lit from behind and a box of tiny colored pegs, red, green, blue, orange, that you pushed through holes to create luminous designs. You could trace pre-printed templates or freestyle your own masterpiece. A clown's grin, a sailboat at sunset, your own name glowing like a neon sign. The warmth from the light bulb behind the screen gave it a cozy feeling, and the soft glow made your room feel like magic. It was quiet play, patient play, the kind where your tongue stuck out in concentration and the world around you disappeared. Parents loved that it was mess-free. Kids loved that they were in control. Once finished, you sat back in the dark and admired your work, a tiny artist with your own spotlight. Over time, more templates arrived: cartoon characters, animals, seasonal themes. But even with no pattern at all, the effect was the same: a toy that made you feel like a creator. In a world before screens lit up everything, Lite-Brite let you light up something of your own, one peg at a time. There were no signs, no trails, and definitely no cell reception. Not that it mattered. The hidden fishing hole Dad always took you to might as well have been a secret passed down through generations. You had to park on a dirt shoulder, hop a barbed wire fence, and walk through brush that snagged at your socks like it wanted you to turn back. But then, there it was. A quiet patch of water framed by trees and pure silence. No people, just frogs, the buzz of dragonflies, and the occasional splash of something just out of sight. Dad would hand you a rod, already rigged, and say, "Let's see if they're biting today," like it was a ritual. He always had a story about the one that got away, usually involving a fish the size of your leg and a broken line. You never saw it, but you believed him. And on the days you did catch something, even if it was just a bluegill the size of a cookie, he would hoot and holler like you had just pulled up Moby Dick. You would sit there side by side, quiet except for the occasional snack or Dad humming an old tune. But if you want to hear about the reward after a good fishing trip, let me take you to the drive-through dairy farm. Glass bottles, cold milk, and maybe even ice cream. Boombox battles turned sidewalks into stages and backpacks into speaker cabinets. In the 1980s, carrying a massive boombox on your shoulder was more than a way to listen to music. It was a declaration. You had style, you had taste, and you had batteries heavy enough to power a small city block. These machines blasted everything from hip-hop to hair metal, and they did not ask for permission. You walked down the street with your soundtrack trailing behind you, volume all the way up, head nodding to the beat. Some kids parked them at basketball courts. Others lined them up outside corner stores. Whoever had the best bass usually won the crowd. Tapes were traded, dials were turned, and sometimes spontaneous dance-offs broke out right there on the pavement. Boomboxes were heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. But in a time before smartphones and Bluetooth, they were portable pride. They made noise. They made statements. And if you saw someone approach with a fresh cassette in hand and a boombox on their shoulder, you knew something good was about to happen. Boombox battles were not just about the music. They were about being seen, heard, and remembered. The camera and film shop was a cathedral of forgotten technology. You walked in, and the air smelled like chemicals and time. Behind the counter, rows of yellow Kodak envelopes waited like tiny mysteries. Dad would head straight for the slide carousel projectors, lifting one like it was a sacred artifact. "Kodachrome," he would whisper. "They just don't make colors like that anymore." You did not know what he meant, but you believed it. You spun the projector just to hear the satisfying click, click, click of slides falling into place. There were shelves of lenses, tripods, flash bulbs in boxes older than you, and glass cases of second-hand cameras that looked more like museum pieces. Dad talked shop with the clerk, dropping words like aperture and ISO like he was reading from scripture. You picked up a Polaroid and tried to figure out how it worked. The clerk let you snap one. The photo came out blurry, overexposed, but it still felt like magic. Dad bought a roll of film, maybe 2, even though he already had 6 at home. "Just in case," he would say, just in case the light hit right. And on the drive home, with the bag of film in his lap, he would say, "One quick stop." That stop? A smoky little pool hall where you got a taste of grown-up cool, even if just for one night. Record players were more than machines. They were furniture, ritual, and mood setters all in one. In the 1960s, every home had one, whether it stood alone on a tabletop or was built into a cabinet the size of a small sofa. You lifted the lid, selected a vinyl record, and gently placed it on the turntable. Then came the careful lowering of the needle. a tiny, deliberate act that brought a whole room to life. The crackle before the music started was half the experience. Whether it was the Beatles, Patsy Cline, or the Four Tops, the sound filled the air in a way no radio could match. You listened to full albums, start to finish. You memorized the order of songs. You stared at the cover art like it held secrets. Records were delicate, and so was the act of playing them. Dust had to be brushed off. Needles had to be replaced. Some turntables had automatic arms, others had to be nudged by hand. Either way, it felt like ceremony. The music had weight, not just in sound, but in the effort it took to hear it. Families gathered for listening nights. Teenagers escaped into headphones. A stack of records leaning against the wall told you everything about someone. And even when the music skipped, it felt like part of the charm. That moment when the room fell still, waiting for the needle to find its groove again, it was quiet, real, and unforgettable. Today, vinyl has made a comeback, but for those who grew up spinning hits in the 1960s, it never really left. Got a favorite? Drop it in the comments, like if you smiled, and subscribe for more blasts from the past.